Yeah. So just a couple of things about what we'll be doing moving forward. I am going to record each one of these that we do. Biscuit's working on potentially on the website, having a place for them to sit, so folks can go back and they're able to join us on Wednesday mornings, to have them either individually, or if they want to do, if it's something they want to pull an AO together outside of their regular beatdown times, they'll have it available to them. So also a quick reminder, I've only got 3 names right now on the spreadsheet to lead. MedBall's got next week. I think Markup has signed up for a couple of times after that. So I'll make that link available again. And if you'll just go in and just put your name wherever you're comfortable, certainly more than once, so we can have different voices leading each week. And if you're not getting the newsletter that they specifically do for QSource, I'll put that link out again today as well. But it's a pretty cool newsletter. Like the after next week, we'll be caught up. Like right now, technically, they're doing week 2, so they sent out some pretty cool resources for folks to read and absorb during the week. They also got a link to some podcasts that others are doing. I also would encourage you to subscribe to the podcast that the nation is doing each week. I haven't listened to this week's yet, but it's a good, if you're going to lead, it's a good help to get you prepared. It's also just a nice motivation to keep you going as we go through this each week. So a lot of cool stuff out there to help QSource go well. And I do hope that maybe outside of this, either with your AOs or something like that, if there's a way that you want to use it, either in just your group itself, do so. You know, it doesn't just have to be here on Wednesday morning, but this is certainly a good time to get us started. Encourage more guys to come be a part of this as much as they can. So as we crank up this morning, you know, the first week I was, it's always interesting when you're the first one to kick something off, right? Because you're thinking you have all this pressure because you got to like, and that's part of the reason I wore my Clemson shirt, you know, it gives me some enthusiasm. You know, so, but as I was reading through, and I read through QSource, I was reading through, I was getting ready, I was like, you know, what do you do to get folks kicked off and cranked up about doing something like this? And I was thinking about, well, you know, it's New Year's, we all make resolutions, we all have things that we want to do differently. And I'll be honest with you, I gave up on resolutions years ago. With a very dear friend from when I grew up used to say that, you know, resolutions really are nothing more but that checklist of activities for like the first 2 weeks of January. And then after that, they pretty much get gone. And he used to say the thing we need to be focused on is, instead of resolutions, let's make a commitment to form new habits. And it was interesting because as I began to think about that, and I began to think about my own life, I began to make this connection genuinely between what disruption actually looks like and what that looked like in my life. Because, you know, when all of us in some way or another, we want to get better, right? You know, we want to be better physically, we want to be better emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and truly not just for ourselves. You know, yeah, when I get up in the morning and I'm in the shower and I'm getting ready, I want to look in the mirror and think, you know, that's a pretty good guy right there. Whether it's because physically I'm in better shape, emotionally I'm handling things well, intellectually, mentally I'm getting through life. You want that sense of being able to accomplish things, but often we get stuck on that cycle of insanity where we keep trying the same things over and over. It just doesn't work. And that's where, you know, what we call status quo sets in, right? Because we get used to. Or maybe we did accomplish something in our lives and we got to this place that we thought was the pinnacle and we stopped there. We didn't go any further. You know, we learned to live with that. Like, you know, I can remember many years ago, Chelsea, my daughter and I were in an auto accident and everybody knew about it because it's right out on Highway 70. I mean, on Startown Road, we were in the hospital for a couple of days. For the longest time, people would recognize Chelsea as these people who had that accident, right? Because we went to Raleigh and we testified about kids in kids in seat belts in the back seat and all that kind of stuff. And it's easy to get stuck that's who I am, right? I'm the guy who was in the car wreck who went to Raleigh and testified, and now there's kids are required to wear seat belts in the back seat, right? But that was 40 years ago. Okay, and I'm still in that. And that's what status quo does to us, because I'm still stuck in that. And I haven't done anything differently. And when I look in my faith story, what God has said, I mean, Jesus said, I came to have life. I came to give life so that you might live life more abundantly. And when you look at that word abundantly, it talks about change. It talks about being dynamic, not static, which is where we get the word status quo from. We're not stuck in the same way of doing things over and over again. And even as we get to that place, we become comfortable with the status quo. And the problem with the status quo is that it can make us selfish. It can cause us to have an unhealthy image of it's all about me. Yes, when I'm getting better, I got to focus on me, right? I've got to take better care of myself. I've got to eat better. I've got to exercise. I've got to exercise my mind, all the things I have to do to get better, right? But many times when we get stuck in the status quo, what's happening is we like where we are because it's familiar and it's comfortable. I don't have to work very hard. I can get up in the morning, I can drink my coffee, I can go to work, do the things I do for 8 hours, and I can come back home. I can watch a football game, I can eat supper, I can go to bed, I can get up the next day and do the exact same thing over and over and over again. And at some point, if we're not careful, we think that's okay. Until something hits, something happens that causes that disruption. And I think every man here could probably testify in some way to various disruptions in your life, right? Where you were stuck in some type of status quo and something, an event, and or someone came along and just rubbed against that, right? And you hate it when that happens, right? And it's, you know, I look back at my own life. I mean, obviously the car wreck with Chelsea and getting married, having children. Several years ago, many of you know my story, David commits suicide. That's a disruptive event, and you have a choice when those things happen, right? How you're going to respond to that, because it makes it clear that where you are and what you are doing is not a healthy place to be. You're not doing yourself or other people around you any good when you're stuck in that status quo. Okay. And so I think about those disruptions and what they do, because again, what they do, especially when it's a person, is they just start to rub against everything that you're used to, right? Many of you know I've started a new work. I've changed jobs in the last 6 months, and I've gone back to county level work, and I inherited an agency. I'm manager for an agency. I'm an agency that was very much stuck in status quo. So we have 2 new managers, me and one other, that have come in, and we have started to push against that status quo. That's not how you're supposed to do things, folks. This is what policy says. This is the right thing to do. This is, and now you talk about some pushback, and you talk about all kinds of people getting upset. Boards of commissioners, why are you spending all this money to do these things? You know, somebody else comes in and begins to push things, and see, but think about it, when you look back at your own life, we needed that, right? If we got to a place where we were stuck in the status quo, we needed something or somebody to come in and make us change. And it started with, we had to recognize that we needed to change, because a lot of times, as I said, with the status quo, we don't know that. And even with the status quo, we do it with good things. One of the phrases that I see out there, and I like it because I think it motivates a lot of us, we were made for hard things, right? But we also have to be careful with things like that, because that can become status quo, because all of a sudden it's about, well, let me go climb this 10-foot mountain and let me do that 100 times for the rest of my life. That's a hard thing. The problem with that is, if I don't reach out and climb the 20-foot mountain, I don't make myself any better, right? I can remember when I first started running 15 years ago, 5K about killed me. All right. I think Marcus and Kara were a part of one of those original groups that I ran in, right? That very first 5K about killed me, right? I did 5Ks for years after that, and I was great, smoothing right along. It was great. A buddy comes along and says, I'm getting ready to run this half. Why don't you run it with me? I pushed back and I finally ran it. I was like, I got better because I had to stretch myself physically, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, everything, to get ready to run 13 miles versus 3 miles. Right? And so something like that. So all those kinds of things, we get stuck in that, and we need something or someone to come along. Right. But the beautiful part is, and this is where we go with Q source, right, is that I can't keep that to myself. I shouldn't keep that to myself. All right. As a leader, wherever I am, and I think that's many times where we struggle with the leader piece. All right. Because we know God put man and woman in the garden, and he said to them, be fruitful and multiply. Right. And so there's this intent of you're constantly moving forward. Multiplications means you're getting bigger, which means you have to get better, you have to get stronger, but you got to move out. You got to encounter other people, you've got to do things. And so there's this intent there that we are leaders along the way. And I think where we struggle sometimes is with our definition of leader. We assume that when we say someone is a leader, that they have to be in charge all the time, right? Like they got to be the boss. I can't make a change unless I'm the boss. Crap. Yes, you can. Right. Think about all of the people and places that you're involved in just today. Many of us will leave here. We'll go to work. We might have breakfast with our families. We may go to lunch with a buddy. Maybe some will get together this evening for a workout. We may go to church this evening. You know, there may be a community group that we're a part of. All kinds of people and places that we encounter. Right? How many of those places have you walked into? And because there has been a disruption in your life and you have gotten better, did you recognize, or you recognize right now, something's got to change? You know, this is not good, right? And that's one of the first characteristics of a leader who's recognized disruption in their lives and the benefit of it. And then they start to say, okay, this needs to go. It's like being that disciple of Christ. He's done it for me. I got to take it out there too. And so wherever we are, we learn to recognize status quo is here and it's not good. And we also recognize as leaders that part of what our role is, all right, if it's not good, so what is better? What does better look like? What direction do we need to start moving in? And so not only do we recognize that disruption needs to happen, we recognize that the status quo is taking over, but we also say, here's where we need to go, right? And that's where it can get tough. Because when we begin to move in that direction, because again, disruption implies that there's going to be movement, right? When you recognize that things got to be changed, you got to start moving in a different direction. And people got to start thinking about something differently and doing things differently than what they've done, right? I can remember, some of you guys have heard me tell this, my own story being EH'd into this. You know, Medball and Belding and Centerfold were after me for at least 3 years, all right? But I was always like, you know, I'm fine because I was running and I thought I was eating okay and I was doing all kinds of stuff, you know, but I'll never forget. One day in the middle of work, Lip Sync called and said, because we had been visiting Mount Sinai Church, Lip Sync called and said, I want to do something to help that church get better with their youth program because they were wanting to build a community center. And he said, I need your help because I'm not very good organizing. So we started working, and that's what produced 36 Hours of Joy. And I don't know what it was about that weekend, right? Because I ran a little bit. I think some of those guys ran 10,000 miles. I ran like 10. Okay. I don't know what it was about the weekend. But when it was over, because all throughout the weekend, there was just this nudge. You are not doing enough. You are not doing enough to take care of yourself. You are not doing enough by being around other men consistently. Much to, if you didn't see the article that Gump put out last night about how men's friendships have just diminished over the years. Talk about status quo, right? You know, we get comfortable with what we're doing. Like, I don't need the other, I'm fine. You know, unless we're going to get together for the ball game, right? And so it hit me. And so I posted, and I started to post, all right? And all those guys, not just those 3, but all the men in that group, I began to see, and they began to push me. Right. And as I posted since, I'll never forget one of the funniest times I went to Organ Grinder for the first time and did one of their rucking beat workouts. And Terry was there. Oh Lord, Crop Duster was there. Okay. Okay. And we're doing that thing where you run to the end and you kind of lean, you put your back against the wall and you get down to that 45-degree stance. And he said, Feeney, I'm older than you. You can get down to 40. You can get your ass down to 45 degrees. I'm like, okay. So I did. Right. But again, that's the disruption, right? That's where somebody, even just little things, are pushing us. And it was kind of like, well, who's this old man talking to me? I can know what I'm doing. But that's exactly what hits the status quo, right? You know, that's what pushes us. That's the disruption that we need. And so everywhere we go, we have the ability to do that. We don't necessarily have to be in charge. I don't have to be the boss. I mean, in my work now, I have the advantage that I can lead that way. But also when you lead that way as boss, that's when that third characteristic comes in. Why am I doing it? Right? It's not to stroke my ego, all right? But it's because I look back over the last, especially the last year and a half that I've been a part of F3. And then I look back at my entire life and how God has done things, the people that he has put in my life, the disruptions. And I recognize I'm better. I'm different than what I was, but I'm better than what I was, right? And so when I look at the people around me, because it has got my focus again away from me, it's not internal, protecting what I want to be the status quo. It's about what's out here. And I recognize there are people around me that I care about, that I want to be better. And I want to help them get to that place. It won't always be comfortable. It won't always be fun. But if I begin to push them and move them in that direction, right? And that's one of the things we share with our staff regularly, right? Is we want you to be the best that you can be for the community here, all right? And so when I think about disruption as leaders, we need disruptions in our life to keep us out of the status quo. But then we have a responsibility as leaders too, to recognize wherever we are, where disruption is needed, and to begin to move in a better direction, and to do it out of the love that we and the concern that we have for the people around us, because we know what the benefit is when we use disruption that way, when we accept this, what disruption does, right? So as you move into this week, I just encourage you, if you're not the boss, that's okay. Where do you have that influence? Where have you recognized that disruption is needed, that things need to change? And how can you do that moving forward? All right, looking at the people that God has put right in front of you to get it done. Okay. I'm just curious. We got some time left. I'd love to hear from some of you about. You've heard my story a little bit, just how disruptions have impacted your life, and maybe ways that you have been able to disrupt and move people or event or whatever into other areas. Who'd be willing to talk a little bit?
Finney, I'll speak up and first before sharing anything. I just think I do think there's a purpose for disruption being the first foundational principle of this Q Source manual, right? I think part of it is understanding that there's a need for a change. I think we can look around. And there's actually several aspects within our world and society where we can see things that aren't working the way that they're supposed to, or the way that really makes sense. And so trying to figure out what role do we play in that, to be comfortable with that disruption. I've shared before a couple of times, but when I first read through this and thought through my role, I'd seen myself as a leader, had been in positions where I was in some ways the boss, and in other ways where we got together with a group and I just had the louder voice and things to move things along. And then the question came to my mind of, am I causing any movement? And am I simply managing? Right? Am I managing? Am I governing? Are we doing the same thing over and over again? And I'm just the one talking. And so trying to figure out, am I moving anything that I have of influence over to advantage, and identifying what that advantage looks like. So I don't know. I think that's one of the most powerful parts for me with this, is we look around that and to identify what our role is and what are we doing with it. Are we moving that which we have influence over towards advantage? F3 is, of course, a great place, and you'll hear this a lot of times through Q Source. It's a perfect chance to practice disruption, right? Everybody gets a chance to lead, because we want everybody to get to Q, and in that you get the opportunity to move other people, to push people, whether that's to look at the guy beside you and say, hey, get lower on that people's chair on the wall, or it's, hey, we're going to do one more lap, one more Dale Jr., right? And you're going to run it, right? As opposed to staying back at the flag. So we get to practice that, and that's one of the purposes of F3, is an opportunity to practice that leadership. And again, even the foundational principle of disruption. What does it look like to change people's status quo and to push them into that next level of doing that? So I don't know. Those are my thoughts.
Cool. Thank you. Someone else? Well, so as we wrap up this morning, I just I appreciate that question, Medball asked. I think that's a great question to ask wherever we are. Are we causing disruption? You know, and part of it is the recognizing. I think maybe the first question is, are we able to recognize where there's a need for disruption? And then are we causing it? You know, are we impacting in such a way, whether it is a new exercise that you do with when you're queuing, or something in your family, whatever it may be, are we doing that? So I just strongly encourage, as you start this, get the rest of this week going into next week, ask that question. Do you recognize the need for disruption, and are you pushing that disruption in every area of your life? Okay. Anything before we wrap up, anything in particular guys want to share with as far as things we need to be praying about, remembering over the next couple of days, and things going on? I know at least I know with the station, we got several guys infected with COVID now. And so we've got some of them down and out. I think we discovered at work too, that Omicron is just extremely contagious. So please take care of yourself. Certainly, I don't think it's as serious, but it's a lot more contagious. You can get a lot quicker and easier than you could with the other ones. We just got a lot of people out. So remember those folks. Other prayer things or anything going on?
Feeney, I'll share. My son Mac tested positive yesterday.
Oh wow! Okay,
at school. Yeah. So you know, we have not been this much affected by it. You know, it's been all around us, of course. But it's funny. We went right into that cycle that everybody else goes into. It's like, okay, what does this mean? And where do we need to quarantine? And what's the protocol? And all this stuff. Are we positive too? You know, you're most contagious 2 days before symptoms show up. And so right now we're all like, is that a symptom? Is my throat sore? And
sure,
do I have a headache? And
right.
You know, that kind of stuff. So the next few days we'll tell what that looks like. But yeah, there's always one of the things that I've noticed being here at the hospital is whatever version of COVID you may have, it's so unpredictable. You got people that have no issues, barely even know that they have it. So symptoms are really mild. And you got other people that would appear apparently healthy that are in the hospital, you're fighting, you know, so I expect that Mac's going to be fine, and everybody else in the family is vaccinated. He's not. And so, but at the same time, don't know what to expect. So just prayers, strength, resilience for that, and quick recovery. And of course, pray that for everybody, but especially now that it's in our house, it hits home literally.
Sure.
So.
I get it.
Hey, up here in Granite, we've got Miss Kitty. He's going in for a procedure on Friday.
Okay.
And if he checks clear, it'll be his final procedure. So he's just asking for healing, prayer, and guidance for the doctors and all that kind of stuff.
Cool. Got it. All right, let's have a quick prayer together, guys, and then Medball's on cue next week for this. So actually, we combine 2 and 3 next week, so we can the goal is to get caught up with the nation, so that moving forward after next week, we'll be caught up with the newsletter and plus the podcast, so we're all kind of working in sync together. So let's pray and we'll hit the road. Father, thank you again for this group of men and their willingness to spend half an hour talking about getting better. And Father, I pray that as we look at our own lives, we would recognize the need for disruption to make us better. And then Father, as you put us in circumstances with people, an event, whatever it is, may we also recognize the need for disruption. And then Father, be willing to lead that towards change, to making things better. Father, for all these that we've called out this morning, I pray for healing. I pray for Miss Kitty as he goes in for surgery, Father, that would go well. That it would be the last one for Mac, and that you would keep him healthy, Father. And for all those that we know that are positive with COVID, just help them to get better. And Father, just help us to learn to do what we have to prevent and to take care of and to watch out for each other. Make this a great day, Father. In your name we pray. Amen. All right.
Amen.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Good job, Vinny.
Thank
Good
you.
job.
Thanks, Feeney.
There's Gump, yeah.
I was on the treadmill the first little bit, so you missed me sweating and listening to the first 20 minutes. So
No, so you're not outside running today, right? Okay.
oh no, I Wednesdays I do downstairs in the dungeon in the
Oh, that's
basement.
fine. I got you. Good
Dude,
thing.
Gup, I just realized I've actually never seen you sit. I'm trying to think if I can.
I've
ever seen-
I've never seen him sit down.
Do you have chairs in your house, or do you walk around the table and just eat every time you pass your plate? Is that?
When you carry your plate around with you.
We're a beanbag society here.
Those are probably a little more comfortable than the sun. It's easier to
Yeah.
fall asleep in a beanbag.
That's what helps me get low in those people's chairs. Beanbag, all beanbag.
I don't know. I'm thinking back on your squat form. I'm not
It's pretty
sure.
bad. That's my knees. They're